Now, before we get into the actual material, I have a syllabus which essentially gives you the 8 domains that we're going to cover that are part of the CISSP exam. Now, all domains are not created equal. Not all questions are created equal. ISC squared does weight the questions, and you will certainly find that you have more exam questions from one topic rather than another. Now, Chapter 1, security and risk management. I cannot stress to you enough how very testable this chapter is, because it deals with risks and it moves towards business continuity. The reason that's so important is every decision we make starts with looking at the risks. Even if you're not even aware that you're doing that, we always are looking to risks, and we're never really done managing risks either. Risk management is a huge portion of IT security. Now, everything that we do that starts with risk management marches towards the idea of business continuity. So very, very important chapter. The vast majority of your questions would come from this chapter. When I say the vast majority, there is no other topic on this exam, in my experience and in my opinion, that's tested on as heavily. All right, Chapter 2, Asset Security. This is kind of a short chapter that deals with things like classifying data and protecting data based on its classification. Not a tremendously long chapter, and a lot of the things that are here are going to be covered in more depth in later chapters. Now, Chapter 3, Security Engineering. Good information in this chapter. We start off with, for those of you that were familiar with the 10-domain version of the CISSP exam, this used to be referred to as security, architecture, and design. So what we're going to focus on in Chapter 3 is we're going to focus on the idea that secure design yields a secure product, meaning that we don't think of security as an afterthought, we build security into the mechanism. This will be the chapter also that we look at the actual elements of computer architecture, like the CPU and memory and those ideas. And we also look at security models on which we base our systems or on which we build our systems. So depending whether or not we want confidentiality or integrity, we look to various models that have been produced before us. Another hugely important topic that is in this chapter is cryptography. And that's one of the first things that I noticed is when ISC Square put out the new domain. We went from 10 domains down to 8. The first thing that jumped out of me is, man, where's cryptography? Because it's been such a huge part of the exams in the past. It still is. They've just tucked it under security engineering because, of course, cryptography brings us the actual security that we need. So security engineering is a big chapter. That's where crypto is. Crypto is a very important topic. Next chapter, communications and network security. This used to be called telecommunications, and it really does focus on the essentials of networking, understanding the OSI reference model, getting what the protocols are, attacks at certain layers of the OSI model, mitigating strategies. A lot of good information there, very testable domain as well. Identity and access management. So looking at all the ways we control access to a domain, starting with the identity and identification of our user accounts and starting with provisioning those accounts, moving up to looking at the decisions we use to determine who gets access to what. Of course, we'll talk about principle of least privilege and need to know access, but also some access control models that we actually use to implement those concepts. So that's Identity and Access Management, Chapter 5. Then Security Assessment and Testing. So here we're going to focus on vulnerability assessments and penetration tests. And we'll look at some of the strategies, some of the ideas behind that. Chapter 7, Security Operations. This is a chapter that covers ideas, kind of honestly, that didn't fit other places that are part of the day-to-day security operations within an organization. Here we talk about redundancy, whether it's through backups, clustering, RAID, We talk about some of the other ideas about change management, configuration management, so that's in Chapter 7. And then last but not least, software development security, another important chapter. We'll talk about the software development lifecycle. We'll talk about some common exploits in software, particularly looking at some exploits with web applications and some mitigating strategies. And then we'll talk about databases. And the old joke, why'd you rob the bank? That's where the money was. Well, why are databases a target? That's where the data is. So this is going to be the order in which we're going to cover these modules. If I were to really focus on topics here off the syllabus or just in general for the exam, by far Chapter 1, security and risk management. Just getting some of these ideas that we'll talk about over and over again. Cryptography, even though it no longer has its own chapter, still very, very testable. Telecommunications or communications and network security, Chapter 4. And then Chapter 8, software development security. So big Chapter 1, portions of Chapter 3, 4, and Chapter 8. That doesn't mean that there aren't test questions, of course, on the other chapters, but those are really, really testable.